I want to talk about an event recorded in Luke chapter 7. Overall, the chapter talks about deliverance. We first have the story about the healing of the centurion's servant, now delivered from serious illness and death. Then there's the deliverance of the widow of Nain, who faces a horrible future with the loss of her only child, a son. Then there's discussion about John the Baptist, whom Jesus does not deliver, which sets in higher profile the theme of deliverance. And the chapter ends with a woman who comes into the dinner party where Jesus is a guest and proceeds to wash his feet with her tears and to bathe his feet in a very expensive ointment. And she too is delivered from her sins. So that said, there's a textual problem at chapter 7, verse 11. In the King James text, it says, on the next day, meaning the day after the healing of the centurion's son, Jesus shows up in Nain. But that, for some, that causes a problem because the distance is almost 30 miles. The textual problem is that there's a different reading, which means soon thereafter. So which is the original? In my opinion, after researching this thing, I think the original has to be the next day. One example, Codex D, capital letter D, from the 5th century AD, and is now held in the Cambridge Library, typically expands the stories that it repeats, adding a line here, word there, a whole verse someplace else. But in this case, it gives us the shorter reading, which is the one to be translated the next day. So, what do we see? We see Jesus coming from afar. This little woman is a person of no account in the wider world. She lives on the edge of society. She perhaps has a small group of friends in the village, but outside of those friends, nobody pays much attention to her. She has an only child, a son. He is the heir to her husband's estate. She inherits nothing. She brought into the marriage her dowry. She still has that to rely on, but it won't give her much. And we don't know from the story, we have no idea about her family, whether anybody's in a position to step in to help her, whether anybody in her late husband's family is in a position to help. Surely there will be none of his brothers who will be willing to marry her in what's called a levirate marriage situation. Nobody will be willing to marry her so that she gives birth to another child who can then inherit her husband's estate. How big or small that was. The key is the son, and he's now gone. Jesus knows this. He knows people's thoughts, he knows people's circumstance, and so on, and he knows that she's in trouble. She faces abject poverty. In my mind, I see him getting up about 2 o'clock in the morning and saying, we're on our way, announcing it to the 12 and the others who are part of the entourage. And they're rubbing their eyes and saying, it's only 2 o'clock in the morning. What are we doing getting up? And he said, we have to go. So out the door he goes, and everybody grabs their gear, and donkeys, this sort of thing, and coming behind him as fast as they can go, uphill, almost all the way, 30 miles. So Jesus now reaches the walls of the city, the walls of the town, just as the funeral procession is coming out for the burial. And he stops it. He puts his hand on the bier, on the cot on which this young man is lying, stops it, and says to the mother, "Only believe." Then he raises this young man from the dead. He changes the whole world for this little woman. She will now not only have her son, but he can marry, there will be grandchildren, and there will be family members around her the rest of her life. He makes an enormous difference in this little woman's life from such a distance. One gets the sense that Jesus is interested in us one by one. This story is a full illustration of that principle. Thank you.